One-tricking is a favorite strategy among a lot of different players. In fact, the closer you get towards the end of the season, the more people you're going to run into that are going to be one-tricking. For those of you who have been considering one-tricking to help with your climb, but don't really know what champion to pick, I'm here to help. Picking a champion to one-trick is a very hard thing to do. You have to enjoy the playstyle, the thematic, the matchups, the lane. All of these things are very important. Today we're going to be going over some of the pros and the cons of the most effective one-tricks in the game, so you can determine whether or not you might want to one-trick these champions in the future. Now, before we get too in-depth, I want to remind you to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses that you can use to help you learn any champion out there that you might want to one-trick. If this is something that does interest you, make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, the first time that I recorded this, I went over the pros and cons, but I ended up talking about it for way too long, so I'm going to try and keep things short. The main con for one-tricking is that your one-trick is reliant on its spot in the meta. What this means is that your pick is going to go through times where it gets banned a lot, where it only has bad matchups that are popular, and when it's just an awful pick. If this does occur, then you can look for a new champion to one-trick, you can diversify, or you can just look to stick it out. The pros are very simple. You see, when you one-trick a champion, you learn very quickly. This is because you're in a controlled environment with less variables. Since you are playing the same champion every single game, there's going to be a lot more repetition, allowing you to learn things quicker. This will apply to both in-game mechanics and champion-specific mechanics. On top of that, one-tricking is just fun. To me, at least, it's very fun to play a champion over and over, get really good at them, be able to perform the complex mechanics, perform some really cool outplays. This is the main draw of one-tricking for a lot of people. Hopefully this helps you make the decision on whether or not you want to one-trick. If you have decided that you are looking to one-trick, allow me to introduce you to some of the best champions to be one-tricking right now. Now, we have done videos on one-tricking in the past, and one of the main comments that we get on these types of videos is, why is it that we don't cover champions like Riven or Draven? The reason that we don't cover these champions is for a few main reasons. The first is that champions like Riven, Katarina, and Draven are already known as one-trick champions, so most people already know that this is an option. The bigger reason though is that these champions require a huge time investment and oftentimes just aren't the right one-trick for the vast majority of people. For somebody who's looking to one-trick a champion right now to get as much elo by the end of season as possible, a champion like this just isn't going to be right for them. Champions like these will take too much time to learn to gain any benefit from before the end of season. If you are wanting to learn champions like Riven and Draven and Katarina, I highly recommend heavily practicing them during the off-season. This allows you to get the basics down, and then you're able to take it into ranked once the season restarts and improve it from there. If you're a player that doesn't care about playing the ladder and you just want to find a fun champion to one-trick, then by all means, pick one of these champions if it's right for you. Starting in the top lane, the first champion we're going to be talking about is going to be Camille. Now, starting in the top lane, you've got a few different champions that you can one-trick. Of course, there are some more well-known picks like Renekton, Darius, or Aatrox, but the pick that I want to highlight for the top lane is actually going to be Camille. Camille is a perfect target when looking for things to one-trick. She has a variety of different builds and runes that she can utilize. She has really good mobility. She has a lot of damage in her kit, and she has good pick potential. Now, Camille wasn't even on my radar until I started watching some of the world's players perform in solo queue. In fact, the #1 rated top laner on EOS right now is the top laner for Damwon Gaming, Nuguri. While he doesn't exclusively one-trick Camille, he does play a lot of it, and he shows just how strong it can be for climbing the ladder. It's his most played pick, and it's a very popular pick over in Korea. The skill floor on Camille is rather manageable, but the skill ceiling is very high. You're constantly going to be deciding what you want to be doing with the mobility that you have, and when you should be going in for damage. Camille contests the #1 spot for mobility in top laners, being right up there with Riven. If these are all things that are attractive to you, then I highly recommend you pick up Camille for this end of season, because she's very powerful at the moment. Now with jungle, again, you've got a few different classics with picks like Rengar and Kha'Zix. After the buffs to Shaco though, this makes him one of the best champions to be one-tricking in the game right now. Now he is traditionally played in the jungle role, but he's also viable as a top laner or support by playing AP Shaco. He has one of the best early clears in the entire game, along with some of the best early ganks, meaning he's going to be one of the highest pressure early game junglers out there. The only downside to Shaco is that he doesn't quite have the sustain that some other junglers have. There are a lot of junglers out there that can actually heal during their clear, but Shaco is not one of them. Shaco makes up for this with his ability to invade early. Oftentimes, Shaco is able to get level 3 before the enemy jungler, which allows him to invade with his ignite and look for a kill. The versatility with this champion and the amount of options that he has is one of the reasons why he is such a good champion to invest a lot of time into and one-trick. If we just look at his kit alone, some of the resources that he has with his stealth, his clone, his ability to stack boxes, all of these things make it so that when you have a lot of experience on Shaco, you're able to do so much more with the champion. This is why playing against a good Shaco is so terrifying. They know exactly what their champion can do, and they're going to make the most of it. Moving to the mid lane, there are a ton of different options. There are assassins that are available like Zed, Kiana, or Talon. You could go for mages like Victor or Xerath. There are a few unique picks like Zoe or Yasuo. This role just has so much diversity and so much available to it that you really could one-trick anything and see success with it in the mid lane. My pick for you is going to be Echo. Echo has always been decently popular, and he's always been a champion that has attracted a lot of different one-tricks. However, Echo is pretty hard to play, and he's never been balanced around being played to his fullest. He's very similar to Riven in that way. Most people when they play Echo don't land 4-person stuns, they don't make the most of their shield, they're not able to make the most of their ultimate. There is so much optimization that somebody who doesn't main Echo misses out on when playing this character. He has a lot of mobility even through extended fights. He has a lot of safety with his ultimate and damage. And on top of that, his playmaking ability as a mid laner is pretty much unmatched if you know what you're doing. The only downside to Echo is that pre-6, he isn't as safe as other picks out there. To me, Echo feels very similar to Kassadin, except he's more focused on the mid game and early game, whereas Kassadin is more focused on the late game. Now moving on to ADC, we've only got really one noteworthy pick. You are able to one-trick champions like Vayne, or Ezreal, or Draven, but again, these champions are going to take too much time to invest. You're not really going to be able to see a return for them by the end of the season. There's also champions like Caitlyn that you could one-trick, but Caitlyn's skill ceiling is so high that the vast majority of players can never expect to reach that and make the most of Caitlyn. The only ADC that's going to be fitting for most people is going to be Jhin. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of players out there that love the challenge of Caitlyn and Draven trying to make the most out of those champions. But as far as actually making the most out of a champion realistically, Jhin is going to be your go-to. Jhin still has a ton of skill expression, and you can easily see that just by looking at some really good Jhin players, for example, I Keep It Taco. The main difference you're going to see between a good Jhin and a bad Jhin is the way they use their utility. Good Jhins will constantly be setting up traps for the current play they're looking for. This is either offensively or defensively. Traps can be used to facilitate ganks, they can be used to defend your flank in the late game, they can keep you safe in the laning phase. There are so many different uses for your traps. On top of that, there's the CC provided from your W and from your ultimate. A lot of Jhins will only use their ultimate for damage, but it can also be used to slow the target to help your team catch them. Mobility is also another thing that good Jhins have over bad Jhin players. Jhin one-tricks are going to be using the mobility from their 4th shot or when they crit much more often and in more appropriate situations. While the utility is one aspect to master and that has a lot to offer, the mobility is much more important, I would say. When used properly with the right build, Jhin's mobility can make him one of the most mobile ADCs in the game. Once again, just like the other champions, there's a lot of diversity with the runes and items that he can take, and he can fit into pretty much any team comp. Finally, we're moving on to support. Support is a role that's really hard to talk about at the moment. This is because all of the champions that are worth one-tricking are often banned. Stuff like Blitzcrank, Thresh, Morgana, Pyke, all of these picks aren't really going to be available to you frequently. Their pick and ban rate are so high that it makes it very hard to one-trick these champions. If I had to pick a support for you to one-trick towards the end of this season, I would go with Lulu. Lulu again has a lot of diversity in her kit. She's able to play aggressively in the early game with some of her damage, and she scales really well into the late game, especially if you have a hyper carry ADC. Again, there's multiple different options for your runes and builds, but Lulu is going to fit into pretty much every single team comp as a support, whereas other enchanters like Janna won't. One-tricking mages in the bot lane is hard because sometimes it's just not going to be viable because you're going to have too much magic damage. Lulu is one of the few enchanters that's going to work in every single game. She also has the added benefit that most of her abilities have multiple ways of using them. You have to make the decision on whether polying a target is more important or giving attack speed and movement speed to one of your allies is more important. In early trades, you have to decide between a shield or damage on the enemy. Using your Q in tandem with your E is another added level of difficulty. There's a lot to master when it comes to Lulu, and the vast majority of it is all decision making. She's one of the most complex supports in the game, and while she's not hard to play mechanically, making the right decision is going to take a lot of practice. This is why one-tricking Lulu will allow you to see a lot more success than if you only pick her once out of every 10 games. Lulu is pretty much the only support that I can comfortably recommend you to one-trick in every single game as a support player. Now that's all that we have for today's video on what you should be one-tricking for the end of this season. Hopefully we opened you up to some new ideas and picks that weren't quite on your radar yet. If you have something that you're seeing a lot of success one-tricking and we didn't mention it, then let us know in a comment down below. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion-specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.